Hi, welcome to Senior JavaScript Developer. I wanted to post another video follow-up to the dependency injection video I posted about which strategy do we choose. It's a common question that I've been getting, and I think it's a good one. Now, I have posted a summary of what we'll discuss here in the README file of my code sandbox example, and a link to that will be in the description below. But let's jump into this conversation by looking at the application module graph that we looked at in our last video. So here's my application, and let's pretend that I'm a developer working on this module. We'll call it a branch module. And as I'm coding this up, I realize that my module will need a dependency. We'll call that a leaf. And I'm wondering, how do I access that dependency? Do I bring it in via a parameter or an argument? Do I import it directly, or do I get it injected and provided via inversion of control? And to answer that question, we really have to dive into two related questions. First question is, what are the unit testing requirements for my module? Such that, do I need this functionality of my dependency to change for a test versus how it will run in production? Question number two is, what is this dependency actually doing, and what type of dependency is it? So dependencies generally fall under two main types or categories. The first type is called lightweight, and the second type is called heavyweight. But how do you determine which type the dependency is? Well, let's take a look at some examples to help see if we can determine, is this a lightweight or heavyweight dependency? Here I am in my utilities module, and first let's take a look at a group of functions that are classified as lightweight. These are typically functions which do simple data manipulation. So adding two numbers together is something I probably never need to mock in a testing scenario. I will simply let this function do its job, and it's not resource intensive. It's not taking up a lot of CPU or memory. It's very lightweight. Similar to this one, adding money, yes, it is using a library, but it's still doing pretty simple data manipulation. And so I don't think I'll ever need to mock this, and I can safely import this function directly into my module. Finally, an example of formatting a date, where again, it's just doing simple date manipulation. It's taking a date object, stringifying it, maybe doing a little bit of concatenation, splitting, and returning that date object as a string. Pretty simple logic, and again, not something I really need to worry about ever mocking, and so it's considered lightweight and safe to import. Now you may have noticed I mentioned a couple times, imports are primarily used for lightweight objects because they're difficult to mock, but the dependency doesn't need to be mocked, and so it's not a concern. However, it is important to realize not all dependencies are lightweight. There are several heavyweight dependencies, and these are the ones that you don't want to import directly into your code. Let's take a couple of examples. If I have a dependency that is importing an S3 library from AWS SDK, that is a good indication that this module, this dependency, is doing network calls. And network calls are considered heavyweight because they are talking to third-party systems, and that is something that I definitely want to mock during my unit tests. I want to pretend that I'm getting a response back from a network call and just use that data to see how my module is working. So network calls, I/O calls, event loops such as set timeout and set interval, and a little bit of a gray area might be dates, especially current date and time. Because again, a system running in production would want to grab the current time, but a system running in test would want a test to be repeatable and therefore use the same current timestamp no matter what time the test was actually run at. So there's a bit of a gray area there to be cautious of. Another example would be a major system architecture component such as an event bus dispatch function that you definitely want to mock out during a test scenario. So let's wrap this up. When we're thinking about a strategy for injecting a dependency, there are a few considerations to make. Number one, what are the testing needs of the module? Number two, what type of dependency is it? And number three, once we've determined the answer to those two questions, we can decide that a lightweight dependency can be imported, but a heavyweight dependency needs to either be injected via parameter and argument or via inversion of control. I recommend starting with arguments and parameter injection for heavyweight dependencies. The drawback of this approach is that sometimes you'll notice that you're simply kicking the can down the road. You are passing the responsibility of grabbing a handle on that dependency up to the parent, and so it gets it from its parent, and then that parent has to grab it from its parent. And in React, we call this prop drilling, where the parent passes down a dependency to a child, and that child to its child, and that child to its child, and so on and so forth. Instead, when you notice this starting to happen, it's much better to use inversion of control, where any child down the hierarchy can grab a dependency directly and doesn't need to ask its immediate parent. This also applies to functions, where a function calls a function calls a function, and if the top root function has to keep passing a parameter down so that this child function way down below can get a reference to that dependency, not good. A better idea is to inject that through inversion of control so that the child at any level of the call stack of the function can get access to that dependency. So, lightweight dependencies, go ahead and import them. You're never going to have to mock them. Heavyweight dependencies, either use parameters and arguments or inversion of control. That is the summary, and I hope it's helped. Until I see you next time, enjoy coding.